Hi, everybody. We certainly welcome you today to what we know will be a very, very interesting conversation about what's at stake November 3rd. Very big date coming up. And I'm pleased to be here. My name is Frank Fear. I'm with the Women's Fort Myers communication team, joined by Marian Frane, and also our candidates. They're at center stage for what we're trying to do today. So we're going to start with Connie, and please introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Connie Bennett Martin, and I'm running for Fort Myers City Council for Ward 4.
Hi, I'm Jeff Lopez. I'm running for Florida House of Representatives, District 77. So that district at the Florida House includes all of Cape Coral, and then goes up to Burnt Store Marina, and then Matlacha Isles. I'm running on solving the problems that our community faces, like clean water and climate change.
Jeff McCullers, and I'm running for School Board of County District 2.
Again, thank you for being here. And Marian.
Hi, I'm Marian Frane. I'm the founder of the Women's March Fort Myers. This video is being produced by the Women's March Fort Myers and will be offered as a public service to voters in the Fort Myers area. The Women's March Fort Myers is a 501c4 organization, and we proudly endorse the candidates that are appearing here today.
So let's have a conversation. First presentation by each of you. What is at stake as you see it, particularly for your office on November 3rd? What's important for the voters to understand? Let's start with Jeff.
Well, it's funny, this election is remarkable in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it's really remarkable is it's hard to overstate how much is at stake. Federally, I think that's clear to everybody. At the state level, there are important races that we're going to talk about today as well. In my race, it's a school board race. And school board here in Lee County served 100,000 students, which is a significant portion of our population. Even people who live here and don't have school-age children have a real stake in what we do. Everybody pays taxes. And the school district has a $2 billion budget. Problem that we're having with our local now is they don't work well as a team. There's not a lot of trust with each other. And what they need is a little professionalism and leadership, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Joshua?
Yes, well, let's go over what is at stake in this election, in the 2020 election. In my race, we're facing a decision about whether to go with politics or solutions. Now, we have tried politics for the past 20 years. Republicans have turned Florida into a one-party state. And it's a state that doesn't really respond to the needs of its constituents. So in my district, we're facing a water quality crisis. We're facing algal blooms, red tide, cyanobacteria. And that's not all. We're facing climate change, and it's not just far off in the distant future. This is something that is going on right now. And we have lots of families, working people, children. They need health care. They need a responsive government, good government. They need to ensure that the police and the criminal justice system treat them fairly. And the Republicans and the people that are already in charge in Tallahassee have been in charge for the past 20 years. They don't have solutions to all these problems. They say the same talking points. They govern for the benefit of their donors, of their narrow base. And we need somebody that is going to go in there and actually solve the problems that the community is facing. And writ large, at a national level, this election is also about what kind of country we are. Are we a country that, well, I believe that America is the best country in the world because anybody can be an American, regardless of what we look like, who we are, who we love, or where we come from. And there are certain people that believe that there is just one way to be a good American. And I don't believe that. I think that historically, we have been a country that has embraced people from all over the world and all walks of life. And I think we need to continue in that American tradition. And that tradition itself is at stake in this election. So I see it on both levels. One, do we solve the problems that we're facing? And also, we have an identity crisis as a country, and we need to solve that. So that's what we're facing this November.
Thank you. And if you haven't read Joshua's op-ed that was in the news press, I think on Sunday, it's an outstanding piece of work. Thank you for writing that, Joshua. Connie.
Thank you.
Hi. Our city is, Fort Myers is facing a lot of quality of life issues. And it's time for us to take the good old boy network and give it back to the citizens of the city. And there's a lot at stake here in November 3rd. Because of poorly controlled development, we've concentrated in the downtown area of development, and now we're facing huge traffic issues with thousands of more vehicle trips per day being dumped onto already congested roads. I'd support the smart growth in those areas, in different areas of the city and areas that can actually support it. Growth should pay for growth, and the city shouldn't be subsidizing developers with our money. Our city shares proudly how Fort Myers is the fastest growing city in America, and yet we have continuous issues with construction runoff into our Caloosahatchee and dangerous levels of fecal contamination in our creeks. Somehow our city can find millions of dollars to help developers build and sell condos with 1,400 new ones in the downtown area alone, and yet we can't find the money to clean up the waterways and support growth and they're in our own backyards. I'd be an advocate for trusting the experts and implementing what they're recommending, following what EPA, Calusa waterkeepers have recommended to clean it up and improve our water and keep our families safe. It's essential that we establish in Fort Myers a baseline of infrastructure so that all neighborhoods are brought up to similar standards for streets, sidewalks, utilities, and safety, and a baseline of service and respect so that all people and all businesses are given the same opportunities to succeed. And with the growing economic and medical crisis from the pandemic, our city needs to look at what we can do for our citizens, not just what we're obligated to do. Our city needs to protect the existing social service programs, allocate funds to support programs, mental health, veteran and senior housing, homelessness, and crisis intervention. We need to partner with organizations like the Homeless Coalition and LIFE to create a low-income housing trust fund. And I'll be that voice to protect those programs, to make sure that the needs of the community are put first. And while my opponent has just begun mentioning these issues, I've been fighting for them and bringing awareness to the community for years. We can do better. We have a lot at stake November 3rd, but I need your help in order to bring some real change to our city.
Thank you, all three. All people first candidates. Marian, why don't you ask the first question?
I have a question for Jeff. I've heard several residents complain about the mismanagement of funds in the schools. And I wonder if you, and I am a CPA and I've audited local governments, although not schools. I'm wondering if you agree with that comment and what you would, and if so, what you would do to change that.
Obviously a great question. I was involved in our district financial systems for over 20 years. Mostly in federal grants and federal procurement, but did a lot of work on helping people understand how our bidding processes work, how auditing processes work, how to do audit prep and audit resolution procedures, how to make complicated purchasing and fiscal management processes more understandable to employees in order to get compliance. There's a new issue that's emerging, which is making sure that the public understands all these safeguards for employees. The district has a good purchasing system and a good bidding system, snappy as it should be. And what's maybe even more concerning is we're not explaining to the public what we're doing to make sure that those problems have been resolved. I think we can certainly do better at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Water is clearly an issue that is centered to both of your campaigns, Joshua and Connie. Could you elaborate? In fact, you talked about climate change, Joshua, in your op-ed on Sunday as being a major issue which is connected to water. So if you could each in turn, we'll start with Connie, talk about water and water issues facing Southwest Florida and your constituents.
Rivers and water features that are going into the Caloosahatchee. Several of them are polluted here in Fort Myers, such as Manuel's Branch and Billy's Creek. And just recently, the city allowed FGCU students to come out and clean the creek, even though the coastal waterkeepers reached out to them and said, this is at dangerous levels. You should not be allowing kids to get into the water, and even if they're wearing gloves and masks. Safety is not at the forefront for our city. So one of the issues, it came up at a city council meeting when they were talking about the pollution. They spent over 30 minutes discussing where to put the signage to tell people not to swim in the water, rather than, and it was just signage that said, you know, not to swim in the water. It didn't bother saying, don't swim in the water. It's fecal contamination in here. That would have parents making sure their kids weren't in the water. Instead, it was just a blanket, you know, don't swim in the water sign. And they're not doing very good at letting people know. But also part of the problem is with the infrastructure that we have. We had a lift station fail at Manuel's Branch, and it dumped almost 200,000 gallons of raw sewage into that little water stream. And our city is being not proactive, they're being reactive to the problems that are coming up. We need to have a plan in place for replacing all of these pipes that are deteriorating and corroding over time. We have neighborhoods that the city is spending very large amounts of money to supply the neighbors with filtration for their house filtration, rather than replacing where the problem is in the pipes. And so, you know, we really need to be long-term solution oriented and not this Band-Aid patch and fix. You know, we have areas of development, and the city, even though our developers are being fined, $50,000 is a slap on the wrist for a $40 million project or a $70 million project. And they're getting these little tiny fines and then told, okay, go ahead and continue working. And that's just not acceptable, because that little tiny fine is not impacting the developer, and yet it's destroying our water. And, you know, it makes it really difficult to support, because we need growth and we need development, but we don't need it anymore in, you know, eco-sensitive areas. So it's definitely somewhere that our city, we need to put that as a much larger focus, because once we've destroyed our waterways, you know, we depend on tourist dollars, and we're not going to have that if we don't have what they come here looking for.
Well stated. What about in your district, Joshua, in terms of water reaction to it?
Yeah, so what we need a statewide solution, a statewide system to ensure that we have clean waterways. So I consulted with experts, 3 professors from FGCU, each done separately, to find the best solutions to build a system that will ensure that we have clean water. So here's what we developed, and I actually published this in my website if you want to read more. But we, first of all, need to make sure that our wastewater treatment plants have a mandate to get rid of pollutants like phosphorus. Believe it or not, they don't have that mandate. What happens with phosphorus and with nitrogen, they leach out into the water and they cause uncontrolled growth of algae. That is what has contributed to cyanobacteria and red tide. And lots of people like to point the finger at Big Sugar. And while Big Sugar does have a role, it is a problem that all parts of the state contribute to. We need a solution that involves all parts of the state. And so we have phosphorus and nitrogen leaching out from lawns and commercial properties into our waterways. And we need ways to filter those chemicals out before they cause uncontrolled algal blooms. How do we do that? Well, we have a system of retention ponds and detention ponds, those ditches and ponds that you see all around. Well, those actually serve a purpose. They filter out the water. The problem is that a lot of them, they are kept in an artificial rather than a natural state. They need natural vegetation. We can't take out all the vegetation that they have. We can't kill off the wildlife that collects in those ponds, because the vegetation and the animals, those suck up the extra chemicals there, and the water that goes from those ponds into the rivers and into the sea. If the chemicals stay at a high concentration, don't get filtered out, that causes problems with algae. We also need to involve all our citizens, make sure that we have citizen education about the best practices to make sure that our water is clean, including the role of retention and detention ponds. And because lots of people in several communities, several developments, they have this false expectation about what ponds need to look like. And that contributes to the problem that we keep our ponds at a more artificial level. We also need to involve a system of accountability. And so based on that, I'm going to develop a report card system, just as our schools are graded on their performance. My proposal involves every Florida community receiving a letter grade based on their contributions to clean water. Now, if we involve every part of the state in a solution to clean up our waterways, then we will have a permanent solution rather than a Band-Aid solution to every time we have an algal bloom crisis. We will prevent this at the source. And that is what will preserve our economy. Our economy is based off of the environment. Now, I'm not a tree hugger. No disrespect to tree huggers. I love people that really do love the outdoors. I'm not an outdoors guy, but I do recognize that our economy is based off of our environment, and we need to treat that accordingly. We cannot kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Thank you very much.
Connie, I have a question for you. I was wondering, what specific actions do you think you'll be able to take regarding slowing the development in Fort Myers?
Well, it's not necessarily about slowing the development in Fort Myers. It's about directing it more to the right areas. And so the development like along the riverfront, we have, unfortunately, we have the redevelopment agency. They've done an amazing job of that is no longer a blighted area. And yet we are still giving money to properties as though it is. And we're still giving tax increment rebates to them as if it's a blighted area. It's time for us to sunset the downtown redevelopment agency and look at spending that money in areas that have true blight, areas that really are struggling for that first, second, and third builder to get in there, and start developing the areas. So we've been talking for a while about the Midtown project, and I would support developing projects that are, appropriate for the Dunbar community and things like that. With tax rebate. However, the city needs to stop with the continuous funding of already developed areas. And we're giving away prime real estate at bargain basement prices. Sometimes we're even apparently helping finance some of those developers. And that's one of the first steps that I would take, is to not approve the new developments, especially along the riverfront, that are looking for additional money. Growth should pay for growth. But I would like to support it in the areas that really do need the assistance. And one of the other things is when you start expecting developers to pay for the services that they're going to be getting those roads. We have to do improvements to the sewer lines and things like that in order to support that. And that's all with improving the infrastructure. Well, that's what happens when they pay their taxes. But if we keep giving them rebates, it's us that are paying the taxes, and then they'll eventually catch up, in 2044 or whenever their agreement, ends. But in the meantime, it's you and I that are paying for it, and it's unfortunate. So that's just one of the several steps. But I also would be a huge advocate for no longer allowing permits for developers that are repeat offenders for pollution. And another thing that would help, I don't know if it would really slow down growth, but it would help spur it in other areas. I had spoken with some people through Life, and they had talked about, because we need mixed income housing and low income housing in the city. And they have a fantastic plan where the developers, when they are building, they have to contribute a certain amount of money to go towards a low income housing trust fund. We have huge homeless issues, right there in our beautiful downtown parks, but we don't have a solution yet. And I think if we start making developers, if they want to come into our community, they have to be a part of our community. And that is the way to build that relationship with them and build that relationship with the community surrounding, so the community be supportive of it as well.
Great response. One of the things that I know to be true, like getting to know you, and it's coming through in your answers, is the experience you have. You've been at this in a variety of roles. And I think about you, Jeff, and your campaign, but also your portfolio of experience. You played a variety of roles, and that's so essential when you're playing a governance role, as a school board official does. Very, 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 very critical. Talk a bit about your experience and how you believe that will help you in the governance role on the school board.
I worked for the school district for 35 years. I've taught for 13 or 14 years in our high schools, mostly at Cypress Lake High School. And at Lehigh Senior, I was given the great privilege of being on the founding faculty for an experimental high school that we ran in the 90s. I'm interested in all of the students that aren't ready for school when they show up. We have so many children show up for kindergarten. Name, we don't know where they live, we don't know any colors, we don't know any numbers, we've never seen a book, who don't know anything about what it's like to work with another adult or other children. And so spend the first couple of years with these children trying to catch them up to speed, to get them to kindergarten ready. The district has an extensive program to help help child care centers prepare children for kindergarten. It's great. Nobody knows about it.
Excellent. Marian.
Okay. There's a couple of issues that are really important to me, and Joshua, I wonder what you think of these things, but you know, women, and particularly women of color, still do not earn equal pay to those of what men earn. And women's reproductive rights continually seem to be curtailed. And I'm very, very worried about those things. So Joshua, what would you do to help us in those areas?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So I am fully committed to women's bodily autonomy, and I think it's a disgrace that we see repeated government efforts to impose on that in a way that doesn't really happen with men. So I think that we need to protect it legislatively at the state level, because we know that there's going to be a coming assault at the federal level on women's reproductive freedoms. So we need to progress on that front. And on the issue of wage equality, after many, many decades of fighting against wage inequality, we still haven't achieved it. Now, there are some people that say, well, when you control for these factors and these factors and these factors, there's not that much of a wage gap. Well, that just begs a question. Why are these certain factors, why do they contribute to the wage gap? Because when a woman makes 70 cents to every dollar a man makes, they don't care about the factors. They don't care that they're statistically more likely to go into a lower paying field, or they had to take a time off for building a family. They don't care about all that. All they care about is that they are not getting paid fairly. So we need to take a look at all the factors that affect the pay gap, and we need to address those accordingly. We need to enforce our laws that we already have, so that companies and businesses cannot get away with paying women differently from what their male employees make. That's also another issue. We don't see enforcement of that, and we need to see the protection of that at the state level as well as the federal level. And I think that a lot of times we rely on the federal government to do the heavy lifting on protecting rights. And I think that it's not great to place all our eggs on one basket. In order to truly make change, we need to seek change at all levels, locally, at the state level, and federally. So that's my position on that.
Yeah, very good. One of the things that I admire about all three of you I've gotten a chance to get to know each of you. And I think it's very important, clearly, in today's politics, is civility. And each of you handles yourself, manages yourself very, very well, both with peers and also with the public. You know, we talk a lot about civility, but it's when the tire hits the pavement. Obviously in your campaigns, you've shown that you can function in a very civil way and are very responsive to the public. This is an issue in Southwest Florida too. It's not just a national issue. I'm laughing because I could think of about 30 different examples, probably 10 in the last day, just on Facebook. Connie, your thoughts about civility, engaging in a civil manner as a city council person?
I just think it's really important because what it comes down to, it's still everybody is somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's child. And, you know, we have to, you know, we don't always know the position in life or where somebody is coming from or what has put them into the mood or the disposition that they're in. And, you know, I always try to take it with a little bit of compassion, listen to their point of view. You know, sometimes there's things that I've listened to that have changed my point of view on things. And I think as long as we're respectful, we start somewhere where we have that common ground and no one's trying to one up the other person. You know, I think ultimately our country has been very divided into some extreme, you know, either direction, but the rest of us are all in the middle. And the rest of us have, you know, we care about our neighbors. When these signs all go down, we're still going to come outside and walk the dog and talk to our neighbors and be friendly. And if we're not civil, you know, we've lost everything. And I just think it's really important. And, you know, when the day is over, you might be coming from one particular position and one stance. And, you know, it might not be until 2 a.m. when all of a sudden that conversation you had with somebody else and you went, wow, I didn't lift them up or I didn't listen to them. And, you know, that to me, that's really a painful thing because I mean, it keeps me up at night if I didn't listen to somebody or if I didn't try to at least bring myself to a place of understanding. And I think that, you know, things have been rough in this country for a little while. And, but I think there's a great divide, but I think there's going to be also a great coming together. Great. It just takes people and time.
Jeff, if there's anything that's rock'em sock'em, it's the Lee County School Board. You know, headlines in the news press all the time about people not always getting along with each other and not being civil at all times. Your temperament is outstanding in terms of being able to come in, calm people down, and focus on the dialogue and the discourse. I imagine that's one of the reasons you're running. But could you talk about the issues that the board has faced in the past and how you would help address those issues? I'm talking about civility.
Well, wow, what a great topic and what a great opening. And I know all of the board members, and I know they're frustrated at the situation in which they find themselves. They are looking for successes together, ways to work better together. And what I would bring to that is classroom experience. My experience as in our HR division, I used to fire people for a living. You know, I used to help employees with businesses work through their problems. I used to mediate situations. Supervisor was really sore at an employee, and the employee was sore back, and they've still got to work together. Over time, you just learn how to de-escalate, how to defuse, how to focus people on their shared interests. And I'm not saying I'm a miracle worker, but I do think I can bring more to it than what we do.
Thank you. Great responses. Marian, do you have a final question for our group before we go to close?
Yeah, I do. You know, COVID pandemic is on our minds constantly, and Governor DeSantis has pretty much opened up the state of Florida. And each of you in your own respective offices may be able to have an impact on the way we respond to this pandemic. And I'm just wondering, you know, what course of action you think we should be taking?
I actually spoke up at the city council meeting when they were talking about the mask mandate. I think that we needed to follow what Port Charlotte set out to do, because it was also supportive of, it was the businesses that reached out to the city council in Port Charlotte. They wanted the city council to mandate it, so that way their employees weren't the ones that were having to confront people and, no, you can't come in without it. They wanted that. And, we're on another uptick. It's something that we really need to consider. Is it inconvenient? Is it all of those things? Yes, it can be. But at the slightest chance, if you're going to listen to the science, at the slightest chance that it does help, which science says it does, then it doesn't make sense for us not to. So I would be an advocate for having a mask mandate and having it up for review every 3 months until we, have a cure, until it's no longer in a pandemic. I think it's just a precautionary thing that we need to do in order for our city to continue thriving. Our city has been hurting and we don't need another shutdown. And we can prevent it. We can prevent businesses having to grind to a halt if we start taking some extra precautions. There's no reason, whether it is water or homelessness or police or a pandemic, there's no reason for us to not listen to science and not listen to the experts. City council members, commissioners, we're not the experts. We're just an opinion. And we're supposed to represent what's in the best interest of those that we're, representing. And, when you're letting people die because you choose to ignore science, it's not something I could do.
Joshua.
Yes, and I do agree with Connie. We need to find a way to encourage mask use, and a mask mandate is one of those ways. I support one with a focus on compliance rather than penalties, because we need to increase compliance. Now, they say that 80% mask usage is as good as a lockdown. So we don't have to lock down our state. We can maintain our economy open with a mask mandate and mask compliance. We also need to vastly improve our test and trace system. The testing turnaround times have been chronically long, and on some occasions they have been embarrassingly long, several weeks. Now, if you get a test back after several weeks, well, that's useless because the virus runs its course in many cases after just a couple of weeks. And this is not rocket science. This is something that has been tried in several countries and have been able to maintain their economies open and thriving. And we need to. There's no reason why we can't do the same thing in Florida. We can maintain our economy open and thriving for business with mask compliance and a robust testing and tracing system. And we also need to listen to the experts. That's the bottom line. If I am in the legislature, I'm not going to be an epidemiologist. I can't know everything. I don't know everything. And the point of having experts is that we don't need to know everything. We just need to know who to listen to, and we need to listen to the right voices.
Excellent. Marian, we hit a home run at Women's March by endorsing these three wonderful candidates. We could go on for all afternoon, but let's do a round robin in terms of closing comments and then bid our audience adieu. Let's start with you, Connie.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to learn more about why we're running and giving us this venue to share with you. I've been attending our city council meetings for the last 15 years. I have been fighting to improve the city's transparency and trust issues all along. I've reached out to the community when there was nothing but a cardboard sign posted by the city at our boat ramp that it was closed. And again, when our dedicated park space was being given to developers and when roundabouts were being pushed on McGregor Boulevard. I shared with the community when Centennial Park was being closed for improvements and the homeless were kicked out, all without any city notification to the public. I don't want to always be the person to have to sound the alarm. I want to work to improve our city's transparency and accountability issues, to be that connection between the city and the people so that we're all represented and so that we all have a voice and so we are all equally important. And my desire is to help the community. It's not on a new whim. Our city is diverse, and I am the candidate that can help bring people together, build bridges, listen to residents, and foster ideas that'll work for everyone. And if you want to learn more information about me, my website is connie4ward4.com. It has information in English, Spanish, and Creole. And I hope that I've earned your vote. And if so, I hope you remember to vote Connie Bennett Martin for Fort Myers City Council, Ward 4.
Thank you, Connie. Joshua?
Yes. Like I said before, we have a decision to make in this election. And for my district, that means going with the same leadership that has brought us polluted waters, that has done nothing on climate change, that has stood in the way of affordable health care, that has done very little, if anything, to make sure that our police and criminal justice systems are fairer, and that has done very little on all these sorts of issues. We need leadership in Tallahassee that is focused on solutions, on results, on doing what is in the best interest of our citizens. Now, in my day job, and I'm an attorney, my job is to represent my clients to the best of my ability to seek the best results for them. As a representative in Tallahassee, I will seek the best results for my constituents in District 77. We need real solutions. We need to clean up our waters. We need to stop climate change. We need to make sure that everybody in our state is able to pursue the American dream. And that is why I'm running. To find more information on my campaign, you can go to joshualopez.vote or follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter at Vote Lopez, FOR77. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua. That American dream, Jeff, starts with schools. So please, your comments.
Thank you all, and thank you to the Women's March Fort Myers for the tremendous support that we've had the whole campaign, and for organizing all these different ways to connect with people. I'm on the web, jeffmccullers.com. I'm on Facebook at Elect Jeff. I feel like my teachers saved my life. Every day that I taught and every day that I worked as a district administrator was repaying that debt. I'm here to restore experience and leadership and integrity to our school board, make our school what we really want them to be.
Thank you all. Wonderful conversation. Marian, you have a very important thing to say at the end for all of us. Pay attention to Marian.
I do. We urge all registered voters to exercise their voting rights on Tuesday, November 3rd. Please, please vote. We can make a difference.
This is Frank Fear for Women's March Fort Myers. Hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.